German Shepherd, was hanging off a cliff, crying for help. What baby did next had everyone crying. The wind howled like a trapped animal, shaking the house as a cry echoed through the darkness. Someone, or something, was out there. What happened next would leave an entire town in tears and change one family's life forever. If you're an animal lover, prepare for your heart to break and then be put back together again. This story will show you the incredible bond between a child and an animal that defied all logic. Like, share, and comment where you're watching from. You won't believe how this ends. The storm had been building all day. Dark clouds had rolled in from the mountains that morning, bringing with them a foreboding that had settled over the small town of Pine Ridge like a heavy blanket. By nightfall, the rain was coming down in angry sheets, pounding against the windows of the Carter family home. Laura Carter pulled the curtains closed, trying to shut out the violence of the weather. The wind was picking up, making the old oak tree in their backyard creak and groan. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating their cozy living room before plunging it back into the warm glow of their lamps. "I think this is the worst storm we've had all year," she said, turning to her husband David, who was stoking the fire in their stone fireplace. David nodded, his face creased with concern. The weather report said it might last through the night. Good thing we stocked up on firewood. Their 5-year-old son, Noah, sat on the carpet, his small fingers tracing patterns on the floor. He wasn't playing with his toys or watching the cartoon that flickered on the TV. Instead, his wide blue eyes kept drifting toward the window, his head tilted slightly as if he was listening for something. Laura noticed his unusual behavior and sat down beside him. "What's wrong, sweetie? Is the storm scaring you?" Noah shook his head, his gaze never leaving the window. "Someone needs help, Mommy," he whispered. A chill ran down Laura's spine that had nothing to do with the draft seeping through the window frames. Noah had always been different from other children his age, quieter, more perceptive. Sometimes he seemed to know things before they happened, like the time he'd insisted they take a different route to school, only to find out later that a tree had fallen across their usual path during the night. "What do you mean, buddy?" David asked, joining them on the floor. "There's nobody out there, it's just the storm." Noah's small fingers curled into fists. "Someone's crying. They're scared." Laura exchanged a worried glance with David. "It's probably just the wind, honey. It can sound like crying sometimes." But Noah was insistent. "Number. It's different. They're calling for help." David got up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain to peer out into the darkness. The rain was coming down so hard that he could barely see past their porch. "There's no one out there, Noah. Maybe you heard the branches scraping against the house?" Noah's lower lip trembled. "You don't believe me." Laura pulled him into a hug. "Of course we believe you care about others, sweetheart. That's what makes you special. But tonight, everyone is safe at home, just like us. Nobody would be out in this weather." Noah didn't argue, but the troubled look never left his face. As the evening wore on, Laura tried to distract him with books and games, but he remained unusually quiet, his attention constantly drawn to the windows or the back door. When bedtime came, Noah refused to go to sleep. He stood in the middle of his bedroom, shaking his head vigorously. "I can't sleep. They need help." Laura knelt in front of him, her patience wearing thin. "Noah, honey, we've talked about this. There's nobody out there. It's just a very bad storm." "You're wrong," Noah whispered, tears filling his eyes. "They're waiting for someone to find them." David appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of concern and exhaustion. "Come on, buddy. Even superheroes need their sleep. We can check outside in the morning, if you're still worried, okay?" Finally, after several stories and promises to look around the property first thing in the morning, Noah reluctantly climbed into bed. Laura tucked the blankets around him, dropping a kiss on his forehead. "Sweet dreams, my little worrier," she whispered. As she and David left the room, she couldn't help but notice how Noah's eyes remained wide open, staring at the ceiling, his small body tense as if ready to spring into action at any moment. "Do you think we should be worried?" Laura asked as they made their way downstairs. "He's never been this persistent before." David ran a hand through his hair. "He's got an active imagination, that's all. The storm's probably just getting to him." "I suppose," Laura said, but doubt lingered in her voice. There had been other times when Noah's feelings had turned out to be surprisingly accurate, like when he'd insisted his grandmother was sad and needed to talk, only for them to discover later that she'd been diagnosed with a serious illness, but hadn't told anyone yet. The storm grew more violent as the night deepened. Tree branches lashed against the side of the house, and the power flickered several times before stabilizing. Laura and David went to bed, the exhaustion of the day pulling them into a deep sleep despite the chaos outside. It was just past midnight when Laura was torn from sleep by a sound that made her blood run cold, Noah screaming. She bolted upright, her heart hammering in her chest. David was already out of bed, rushing toward their son's room. They found Noah sitting up, his face streaked with tears, his small body shaking uncontrollably. "Noah, what's wrong?" Laura gathered him into her arms, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. "They're crying," Noah sobbed, his words barely intelligible through his tears. "They're calling for help. I can hear them." David switched on the bedside lamp, casting the room in a soft, yellow glow. "It was just a nightmare, buddy. You're safe." "No!" Noah pushed away from Laura, his face flushed with distress. "Listen, listen." They all fell silent. The storm had calmed somewhat, the rain now a gentle patter against the roof. And then, just as Laura was about to speak, she heard it. A faint, mournful sound. It was barely audible above the rain, but unmistakable once she'd caught it. A cry, a whimper, almost like a voice. "See?" Noah said, his eyes wide. "They need help." Laura's skin prickled with goosebumps. "David?" David was already moving toward the window, pulling back the curtains to peer out into the darkness. "I don't see anything," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Maybe it's just an animal," Laura suggested, her arms tightening around Noah. "A fox or a raccoon caught in the storm." "No," Noah insisted, his voice suddenly calm and sure. "It's coming from the mountains. He's scared." "He?" David asked, turning back to face them. Noah nodded solemnly. "He's hanging on, but he's tired. He needs our help." Laura's heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted to dismiss Noah's words as the product of an overactive imagination. But another part, the part that had witnessed too many of his uncanny perceptions, couldn't ignore the conviction in his voice. "Let me check the house," David said finally. "Maybe something's gotten in through the basement." He left the room, and Laura heard his footsteps descending the stairs. She held Noah close, stroking his hair, murmuring reassurances. She wasn't sure she believed herself. A few minutes later, David returned, his expression troubled. "There's nothing inside the house. I checked everywhere, even the attic. But what?" Laura prompted when he hesitated. "I heard it too, when I opened the back door. It's faint, but it's there, like a whimpering sound, coming from the direction of the mountains." Noah pulled away from Laura, his eyes grave beyond his years. "It's getting weaker. He's losing his grip." A chill ran through Laura. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Who's losing their grip?" "The dog," Noah said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He's hanging off the cliff. He's been calling for help all night." David and Laura exchanged shocked glances. Noah had never mentioned a dog before. "How do you know it's a dog?" David asked carefully. Noah looked at his father with those penetrating blue eyes that sometimes seemed to see right through people. "Because he showed me." "Showed you?" Laura repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "When?" "In my dream," Noah said. "He's big and brown, with black on his face. His paw is hurt, and he's holding on with the other ones. But the rain made the ground soft. He's slipping." The specificity of Noah's description sent chills down Laura's spine. This wasn't just a child's nightmare or imagination. This was something else entirely. "We need to call someone," she said, looking at David. "The Rangers, maybe? Or search and rescue?" David hesitated, glancing at the window where rain still streaked the glass. "Who would believe us? That our 5-year-old son heard a dog crying for help from the mountains." "Then we'll go look ourselves," Laura said firmly, surprising herself with her conviction. "First thing in the morning." Noah shook his head vigorously. "No, now! It has to be now!" His small face crumpled in distress. "He won't make it till morning." David ran a hand over his face, clearly torn between skepticism and the undeniable urgency in his son's voice. Finally, he sighed. "Okay, we'll take a quick look around the property line, toward the mountain path. But just for a few minutes, and then We're coming back inside. It's dangerous out there with all the mud and debris from the storm." Relief flooded Noah's face. "Thank you, Daddy." Laura helped Noah into his rain boots and jacket, while David got flashlights from the emergency drawer in the kitchen. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the ground was sodden and slick as they stepped outside. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and pine. David led the way, his powerful flashlight cutting through the darkness. Laura held Noah's hand tightly as they picked their way carefully across the backyard toward the tree line where their property met the beginning of the mountain trail. "Which way, Noah?" David asked, his voice low. Noah pointed without hesitation toward a steep section of the trail that wound upward. "There. He's up there." They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds their footsteps squelching in the mud and their ragged breathing as the path grew steeper. Laura was beginning to think that this whole excursion was a mistake, that they should turn back and call someone in the morning, when Noah suddenly stopped. "Listen," he whispered. They froze, straining their ears. At first, there was nothing but the drip of rainwater from the trees and the distant rumble of thunder. And then, there it was again. A faint, plaintive whine that made the hair on Laura's arm stand on end. David swung his flashlight in the direction of the sound, but the beam couldn't penetrate far enough into the darkness. "It's coming from up there," Noah said, pointing to a rocky outcropping about 50 yards ahead, where the path curved sharply around the mountain face. David handed Laura his flashlight. "Stay here with Noah. I'll go check it out." "No!" Noah cried, pulling away from Laura's grasp. "We have to go together. He's scared of strangers." "Noah, it's too dangerous," Laura began, but Noah had already darted ahead, his small figure quickly swallowed by the darkness. "Noah!" Laura shouted, panic seizing her as she ran after him, David close behind. They rounded the curve in the path, flashlight beams bouncing wildly, hearts pounding with fear for their son. And then they saw him, Noah standing at the edge of the path, peering over a steep drop where the rain had washed away part of the trail. "Noah, get back from there!" Laura screamed, lunging forward to grab him. But Noah didn't move. He stood perfectly still, one small hand outstretched toward the darkness beyond the path's edge. "It's okay," he was saying, his voice soft and calming. "We're here now. We're going to help you." David reached them first, pulling Noah back from the edge with one arm while shining his flashlight down the slope with the other. The beam caught something moving, a large shape clinging desperately to a narrow ledge about 10 feet below the path. Laura gasped as the light revealed a large German shepherd, its brown and black fur matted with mud, one paw bloodied and raw. The dog's eyes, reflecting the flashlight's beam, were wide with terror. It was clinging to the ledge with its remaining strength, whimpering softly. "Oh my God," Laura breathed, her heart constricting at the sight. Noah was right. The dog's gaze locked with Noah's, and something passed between them, a silent communication that Laura couldn't begin to understand. The dog's whimpering quieted, though its body still trembled with exhaustion and fear. "He held on because I told him we were coming," Noah said simply, his small face solemn in the flashlight's glow. "But he can't hold on much longer." David assessed the situation quickly, his expression grim. "The ledge is too narrow for me to climb down safely, especially with the ground this wet, and the slope is too steep for the dog to climb up on its own." "What do we do?" Laura asked, her voice tight with fear. "We can't just leave him there." Noah tugged at his father's sleeve. "I told him we'd help him. We promised." David nodded, his jaw set with determination. "And we will. Laura, give me your scarf." Laura unwound her long scarf from around her neck, handing it to David, who quickly tied it to his own to create a makeshift rope. "It's not long enough," he muttered, his forehead creased with worry. "And I don't think it would hold the dog's weight anyway." The dog whined again, a desperate sound that tore at Laura's heart. Its paws were beginning to slip on the wet ledge, small stones cascading down into the darkness below. "We need help," Laura said, reaching for her phone. "I'll call emergency services." "There's no time," Noah cried, his voice rising in panic. "Look!" The ground beneath the dog was starting to crumble, the rain-soaked earth giving way under its weight. The dog scrambled desperately, trying to maintain its grip, but it was fighting a losing battle. "He's going to fall," Noah whispered, tears streaming down his face. And in that moment, as they watched helplessly, the dog's eyes locked once more with Noah's, a look of trust, of resignation, of goodbye. The dog's paws scrabbled at the crumbling edge, its eyes never leaving Noah's face. Laura clutched her husband's arm, her fingernails digging into his skin as they watched the terrifying scene unfold before them. There was nothing they could do. The ledge was too far down, the slope too steep. The German Shepherd was going to fall, and they would be helpless witnesses to its death. "No!" Noah's scream pierced the night air, startling them both. Before either parent could react, Noah had wrenched himself from Laura's grasp and lunged toward the edge of the path. Laura's heart stopped. "Noah!" she shrieked, throwing herself forward. But what happened next froze her in place. Instead of tumbling over the edge as she'd feared, Noah had dropped to his stomach at the very edge of the path. He stretched his small arm down toward the dog, his fingers splayed wide, reaching into the darkness. "Don't be scared," he called, his voice suddenly calm and clear. "I'm here." David grabbed the back of Noah's jacket, anchoring him to the path. "Noah, what are you doing? It's not safe." But Noah didn't struggle or try to pull away. He simply kept his arm outstretched, his eyes locked with the dog's. "He needs to know we won't leave him," he said, with a certainty that sent chills down Laura's spine. The German Shepherd's wild eyes seemed to calm slightly. Its frantic scrambling slowed as it focused on the small human reaching toward it. Despite the impossible distance between them, Noah's arm couldn't possibly reach the ledge. There was a connection, something passing between child and animal that defied explanation. "He trusts me," Noah whispered. "He knows I'm trying to help him." Laura crept forward on her hands and knees, terrified that any sudden movement might send them all tumbling down the slope. She reached Noah's side and wrapped her arms securely around his waist, adding her weight to David's grip on his jacket. "We need to pull him back," she said to David, her voice shaking. "It's too dangerous." But David's gaze was fixed on the dog, his expression thoughtful. "Wait," he said. "Something's happening." The dog had stopped whimpering. Though its body still trembled with exhaustion, its eyes never left Noah's face. It was as if the animal was drawing strength from the child's unwavering belief. "I promised we'd help you," Noah called down to the dog. "Just hold on a little longer." Laura didn't know if it was her imagination, but the dog's stance seemed to strengthen, its paws finding a more secure grip on the crumbling ledge. "We need rope," David said suddenly, decision crystallizing in his voice. "And more people. Laura, stay here with Noah. Keep the dog calm if you can. I'm going to run back to the house and call for help." Laura nodded, tightening her grip on Noah. "Hurry," she whispered. David squeezed her shoulder, then turned and sprinted back down the path, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly as he disappeared around the curve. Laura pulled Noah a few inches back from the edge, just far enough to be safer, but still allow him to maintain visual contact with the dog. The rain had stopped completely now, but the night air was cold and damp against their skin. "How did you know?" she asked Noah softly, her mind still struggling to process what was happening. "How did you know the dog was out here?" Noah didn't take his eyes off the German Shepherd. "He called to me," he said simply. "In my head. He showed me where he was." Laura's rational mind wanted to dismiss this as childish fantasy, but the evidence was hanging right in front of her. Noah had known. Somehow, impossibly, he had known. "Has this happened before?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have you heard other things calling to you?" Noah nodded slowly. "Sometimes, when someone's really scared or hurt, but never this loud before." Laura swallowed hard, 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. But now wasn't the time. The dog was their priority. Can you talk to him now?" she asked hesitantly. "Can you tell him help is coming?" Noah closed his eyes briefly, his small face scrunching in concentration. The dog's ears perked up, its head tilting slightly as if listening to something only it could hear. "He knows," Noah said, opening his eyes. "He's very tired, but he'll hold on." They stayed like that, mother and son huddled at the edge of the path, watching over the stranded dog, for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The dog's strength was visibly fading, its body sagging lower on the ledge, but still it kept its eyes fixed on Noah, as if the child's gaze alone was keeping it from falling. Finally, they heard voices and saw flashlight beams bobbing along the path. David returned, followed by 3 men in uniform. 2 park rangers and a firefighter from the volunteer department. "Over here!" Laura called, relief flooding through her. The men approached cautiously, taking in the scene with professional calm. The lead ranger, his nameplate read Morgan, crouched beside them, shining his powerful flashlight down at the dog. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Your husband wasn't exaggerating. How in the world did you folks find this poor fellow out here in the middle of the night?" "Noah heard him," Laura said, not bothering to explain further. "Can you help him?" Ranger Morgan nodded, already unslinging a coil of rope from his shoulder. "That's what we're here for, ma'am. Dan here is trained in large animal rescue, and we've brought the equipment we need." The second ranger, a younger man with a kind face, smiled at Noah. "That's quite a dog you found, little man. Good job on keeping him calm." Noah's solemn expression didn't change. "His name is Max," he said confidently. Laura blinked in surprise. "Noah, how do you—" "Let's get to work," Ranger Morgan interrupted, clearly focused on the task at hand. "Mrs. Carter, why don't you take your son back a little way? We need room to work, and this edge isn't stable." Laura nodded, gently pulling Noah back from the edge. He resisted at first, his eyes still locked with the dog's. "It's okay," she whispered to him. "They're going to help him now. You did your part, sweetheart. You found him." "He's scared," Noah said, his lower lip trembling. "He doesn't trust them like he trusts me." The firefighter, who had been quietly setting up a pulley system between 2 sturdy trees, paused in his work. "Is that right, buddy?" he asked, his tone lacking any condescension. "What would make him feel better?" Noah considered the question seriously. "If he could still see me, and if you told him what you're doing, he understands more than you think." The adults exchanged glances, but no one dismissed the child's words. The younger ranger, Dan, nodded. "Tell you what, why don't you sit right over there on that big rock? You'll be safe, but the dog will still be able to see you, and I'll talk to him the whole time I'm going down. Explain everything I'm doing. How's that sound?" Noah nodded solemnly. "That's good, but be careful. The ground is very soft from the rain." Laura helped Noah to the large boulder the ranger had indicated, settling him securely on its flat top. From this position, he had a clear view of the rescue operation, but was safely away from the unstable edge. The rescue team worked with practiced efficiency. The firefighter secured the ropes and pulley system, while Ranger Morgan anchored his partner's safety line. Dan, the younger ranger, donned a climbing harness and prepared to be lowered down to the dog's position. Just as he was about to go over the edge, Dan turned to Noah. "What did you say his name was, buddy?" "Max," Noah replied without hesitation. Dan nodded as if this was perfectly normal information. "All right, Max," he called down to the German shepherd. "I'm coming down to get you. Just stay calm and don't struggle when I reach you, okay?" To Laura's amazement, the dog seemed to settle slightly at the sound of the name, its eyes darting between Noah and the descending ranger. Dan was lowered slowly over the edge, the rope creaking slightly through the pulley system. He kept up a steady stream of calm, reassuring chatter as he descended toward the ledge where the dog clung. "That's it, Max. You're being so brave. I'm almost there. Just a little longer." Laura held her breath as Dan reached the ledge. The dog growled low in its throat as the stranger approached, its body tensing visibly. "He's scared," Noah called out. "Tell him you're my friend." Dan didn't miss a beat. "It's okay, Max. I'm Noah's friend. He sent me to help you. We're going to get you back up to him, but you have to let me help you." Whether it was the ranger's soothing tone or the mention of Noah's name, the dog's growl subsided. It watched warily as Dan slowly reached out a gloved hand, allowing the animal to sniff it before gently stroking its head. "Good boy," Dan murmured. "That's a good boy, Max. Now, I'm going to put this special harness around you, and then we're going to lift you up. It might feel a little strange, but it won't hurt." With slow, deliberate movements, Dan secured a rescue harness around the dog's body, being especially gentle with the injured paw. Once the dog was safely harnessed, he clipped it to his own harness with a short tether. "Okay, folks," he called up to his colleagues. "We're ready. Bring us up, nice and slow." Ranger Morgan and the firefighter began to work the pulley system, gradually lifting Dan and the dog off the crumbling ledge. The dog whimpered as it was hoisted into the air, but it didn't struggle or fight the harness. "You're doing great, Max," Noah called encouragingly. "You're almost safe." Just as they were nearly at the top, disaster struck. A section of the path's edge, weakened by the night's rain, suddenly gave way beneath Ranger Morgan's feet. He stumbled, losing his grip on the rope momentarily. Dan and the dog dropped a heart-stopping few inches before the firefighter managed to halt their descent by throwing his full weight onto the rope. But the jolt was enough to dislodge more of the unstable ground, sending a shower of rocks and soil down the steep slope. "The whole edge is going!" Ranger Morgan shouted, scrambling backward. "Pull them up now!" The firefighter heaved on the rope, muscles straining, but it wasn't enough. They needed Morgan's strength as well, but he couldn't safely approach the crumbling edge. "David!" Laura cried, instinctively reaching for her husband, but David was already in motion. He darted forward, grabbing the rope alongside the firefighter. Together, they pulled with all their might, fighting against gravity and the rapidly deteriorating edge of the path. Noah stood on the boulder, his small hands clenched into fists, his eyes wide with fear and determination. "You can do it, Max," he called. "Don't be scared, just a little more." With a final, tremendous heave, David and the firefighter pulled Dan and the dog up and over what remained of the path's edge, just as another large section crumbled away into the darkness below. Dan scrambled backward on his hands and knees, still tethered to the German shepherd, until they reached solid ground. Only then did he release the breath he'd been holding. That, he said shakily, was a little too close for comfort. The dog lay on the ground, panting heavily, its muddy coat rising and falling with each labored breath. Its injured paw was held carefully off the ground, and now that it was in better light, Laura could see that the limb was badly swollen. Noah slid down from his boulder perch and approached slowly, his eyes never leaving the dog. The adults tensed, ready to intervene if the traumatized animal showed any signs of aggression. But the German shepherd's demeanor changed completely at Noah's approach. Its tail thumped weakly against the ground, and it lifted its head, ears perking forward. "Hey, Max," Noah said softly, kneeling beside the dog. "I told you we'd help you." To everyone's amazement, the dog dragged itself forward on its belly until it could reach Noah. It licked the child's hand once, then collapsed at his feet, exhausted but safe. Noah gently stroked the dirty fur, his small face solemn. "He says thank you," he told the stunned adults. "He didn't think anyone would find him." Ranger Morgan cleared his throat, breaking the spell of the moment. "Well, he's in rough shape, but nothing that won't heal. We should get him to a vet right away, though." "I'll radio ahead to the emergency clinic in town," Dan offered, already reaching for his radio. "They'll be waiting for us." "Will they let him keep the dog?" Noah asked suddenly, looking up at his parents with pleading eyes. "He doesn't have anybody else." Laura knelt beside her son, her mind still trying to process everything that had happened. "Honey, we don't know if he already has an owner. He might have a family looking for him." Noah shook his head with absolute certainty. "He doesn't. He's been alone for a long time." Laura exchanged a glance with David, who shrugged helplessly. How could they argue with a child who had somehow known about a dog in trouble on a mountainside in the middle of the night? "Let's get him to the vet first," David said diplomatically. "Make sure he's okay, then we can figure out what happens next." The firefighter fashioned a makeshift stretcher from a tarp in his emergency kit, and together, the men carefully lifted the exhausted German shepherd onto it. Noah insisted on walking alongside, one small hand resting lightly on the dog's flank. As they made their slow way back down the mountain path, Laura found herself walking beside Ranger Morgan. "Has anything like this ever happened before?" she asked quietly, nodding toward Noah and the dog. "A child just knowing about an animal in trouble?" The ranger was silent for a long moment. "I've been working these mountains for 20 years, ma'am," he said finally, "and I've seen some things that don't have easy explanations. But this..." He shook his head in wonder. "This is a first, even for me." By the time they reached their house and transferred to the ranger's vehicle for the drive to the veterinary clinic, the first gray light of dawn was seeping into the sky. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a clean-washed world that seemed somehow new and different to Laura's eyes. Or perhaps, she thought as she watched her son tenderly stroking the German shepherd's head, it was she who was seeing differently now. The vet clinic was already open when they arrived, the staff clearly having been alerted by Dan's radio call. A middle-aged woman in scrubs met them at the door, her experienced eyes quickly assessing the dog on the stretcher. "Bring him straight back," she directed, holding the door open wide. "Exam room 1 is ready." They followed her into a brightly lit examination room, where the men carefully transferred the German Shepherd onto a stainless steel table. The dog whimpered as his injured paw was jostled, but he made no attempt to snap or bite. "Everyone out now, please," the vet said firmly. "I need space to work. I want to stay," Noah said immediately, his hand still resting on the dog's fur. The vet looked like she was about to refuse, but something in Noah's expression made her pause. "Is this your dog?" she asked gently. Noah nodded without hesitation. "His name is Max, and he's very brave." The vet glanced at Laura and David, one eyebrow raised in question. "It's complicated," David said awkwardly. Noah was the one who found him. "He was hanging off a cliff," Noah explained seriously. "He held on all night because he knew we were coming to help him." The vet's expression softened. "Did he now? Well, that is brave." She studied Noah for a moment longer, then nodded. "You can stay if your parents say it's okay, but you have to stand over there by the wall and not get in my way. This boy needs medical attention." Laura was about to protest. Noah needed sleep, and watching a medical procedure might be traumatic. But the words died in her throat as she saw the look that passed between her son and the German Shepherd. There was something there, a connection she couldn't begin to understand. "It's okay," she said instead. "He can stay." The vet worked efficiently, first cleaning the mud from the dog's coat so she could properly assess his condition. Besides the obviously injured paw, which she carefully examined and x-rayed, she checked him thoroughly for other injuries. "Well, the good news is that it's not broken," she said finally, as she wrapped the paw in a clean bandage. "Just a bad sprain and some nasty abrasions. He's dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise in remarkably good shape considering what he's been through." "Will he be okay?" Noah asked anxiously. The vet smiled at him. "Yes, he'll be just fine. He needs rest, food, water, and time for his paw to heal, but there's no permanent damage." Noah's shoulders sagged with relief. "Can we take him home now?" The vet hesitated. "Well, that's the thing. We need to check if he has a microchip first, see if he belongs to someone." "He doesn't," Noah said firmly. The vet smiled indulgently. "Let's just check to be sure, okay?" She ran a scanner over the dog's body, the device beeping as it searched for the tiny identification chip that many pet owners had implanted in their animals. After a thorough check, she shook her head. "No chip," she confirmed. "And no collar either. He could still be someone's dog who got lost, though. We'll need to file a report with animal control, put up some notices." "And if nobody claims him?" David asked, already knowing what was coming next. The vet glanced at Noah, who was now gently stroking the dog's ears, and then back at David and Laura. "Then, decisions will need to be made, but he seems to have formed quite a bond with your son." Laura felt a surge of conflicting emotions. They had never planned on getting a dog. Their lives were busy enough without adding a large pet to the mix. And yet, "He saved me too, you know," Noah said suddenly, looking up at the adults with those eerily wise eyes. "I was really scared in the dark. But when I found Max, I wasn't scared anymore." What could they say to that, Laura thought? How could they explain the inexplicable connection between their son and this dog? "We'll see, honey," she said, meeting David's eyes over Noah's head. His slight nod told her they were thinking the same thing. "Let's take it one step at a time." The vet prescribed medication for pain and inflammation, and gave them detailed instructions for caring for the injured paw. "He'll need to take it easy for at least 2 weeks," she cautioned. "No running, no climbing, definitely no cliff hanging." Despite their exhaustion, Laura couldn't help but smile at the vet's attempt at humor. "I think we can manage that." As they prepared to leave, the German Shepherd, Max, as they were all now calling him without question, struggled to his feet. He limped heavily, favoring his bandaged paw, but adamantly refused the offer of being carried. "He says he can walk," Noah translated, as if it was the most normal thing in the world for him to know what the dog was thinking. "He just needs to go slow." And so, they made their slow procession out to the car, the German Shepherd limping along beside Noah, who had apparently appointed himself the dog's official guardian. When they reached the vehicle, Max hesitated, looking uncertainly at the open door. "It's okay," Noah told him, crawling in first and patting the seat beside him. "You're coming home with us." Max still hesitated, his eyes moving from Noah to Laura and David, as if seeking confirmation. "It's okay, boy," David said, surprising Laura with the gentleness in his voice. "You're welcome to stay with us while you heal." That seemed to be all the permission the dog needed. With a soft woof of what sounded remarkably like relief, Max climbed carefully into the car and settled on the seat next to Noah, his large head resting trustingly on the child's lap. As David drove them home through the early morning light, Laura turned in her seat to check on Noah. He had fallen asleep, one small hand still resting protectively on Max's fur. The German Shepherd was awake, his intelligent eyes meeting Laura's gaze steadily. In that moment, as weird as it seemed, Laura could almost believe that Noah was right, that the dog understood more than they thought, that he had somehow called to her son through the storm, that there was something special about the connection between them. "Welcome to the family, Max," she whispered, "at least for now." Max's tail thumped once against the car seat, and his eyes, warm and knowing, never left her face. Could it be possible, Laura wondered, as she turned back around in her seat? Could Noah really communicate with animals? Or was it just the overactive imagination of a sensitive child, combined with an extraordinary coincidence? She didn't know the answer, but as she reached over to squeeze David's hand, she knew one thing for certain. Their lives had changed irrevocably the moment Noah had insisted someone needed help in the storm. What they didn't know yet was just how much more was about to change, or that Max wasn't the only one who had been saved that night. What do you think happened next? Would you have taken Max home too, or would you have been more cautious about bringing a strange dog into your home? The drive home was silent, everyone exhausted from the night's ordeal. Laura kept glancing back at Noah and Max, marveling at how peacefully they slept together. It was as if they'd known each other forever, not just a few terrifying hours. When they pulled into their driveway, the sun was fully up, casting a golden glow over their modest home. It seemed impossible that less than 12 hours ago, their lives had been completely normal, that they hadn't yet met the German Shepherd who now seemed so inextricably linked to their son. "Should I wake them?" Laura whispered to David as he turned off the engine. David studied the pair in the rearview mirror. "Let them sleep a bit longer. I'll carry Noah in." But as David opened the back door, Max's eyes snapped open immediately. He lifted his head, alert despite his exhaustion, a guardian even in his weakened state. The movement woke Noah, who rubbed his eyes sleepily. "Are we home?" "Yes, buddy," David said softly. "Let's get you and Max inside so you can rest properly." Noah yawned, sliding carefully out of the car while making sure not to disturb Max's injured paw. "Come on, Max," he called gently. "This is our house. You're going to like it here." The German Shepherd climbed down cautiously, wincing as his bandaged paw touched the ground. Yet, he didn't whimper or complain, just stood close to Noah's side, surveying his new surroundings with watchful eyes. Laura unlocked the front door, her mind already racing through the logistics. They needed to get a dog bed, food, bowls, all the essentials, but first, they all needed sleep. "The mudroom," she decided aloud. "We can make a bed for Max there for now. It's warm and clean, and he won't get mud all over the house." Noah's face fell. "Can't he sleep in my room? He'll be scared in a strange place all alone." Laura and David exchanged glances. They had never allowed pets in bedrooms. Not that they'd had many pets, just a goldfish when Noah was 3 that had lived a surprisingly long 2 years. "Noah, he's still very dirty from being outside all night," Laura explained gently, "and he needs space to stretch out with his hurt paw." Noah looked down at Max, who was indeed still caked with dried mud, despite the vet's cursory cleaning. Then he looked back up at his parents, his expression serious. "What if I help give him a bath? Then can he stay with me?" David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Tell you what, let's all get some sleep first. Max can stay in the mudroom for now, and we'll figure out more permanent arrangements later." It was a reasonable compromise, but Noah didn't seem satisfied. He knelt beside Max, putting his small arms around the dog's thick neck. "I promised I'd keep him safe," he whispered. "He doesn't want to be alone anymore." Laura felt her heart twisting. How could she explain adult concerns about hygiene and boundaries to a child who had just formed an inexplicable bond with a rescued animal? "What if we leave the mudroom door open?" she suggested. "That way, Max can see into the hallway, and he'll know he's not truly alone." Noah seemed to consider this, his forehead creased in concentration. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Okay, but I'm going to sit with him until he falls asleep. Laura was too tired to argue. Fine. But then, straight to bed for you, young man. We've all had a very long night. David went to find some old blankets while Laura filled a bowl with water for Max. Noah sat cross-legged on the mudroom floor, stroking the dog's ears and whispering to him too quietly for Laura to hear. By the time David returned with an armful of blankets, Max was already drinking thirstily from the bowl, his tail giving a weak wag of appreciation. Together, they arranged the blankets into a comfortable bed in the corner of the mudroom. Max watched them work, his intelligent eyes taking in every movement. "There," David said when they finished. "5-star accommodations?" Noah patted the makeshift bed. "Come on, Max, try it out." To their surprise, the German Shepherd limped over and carefully settled himself on the blankets, turning around 3 times before lying down with a deep sigh. He rested his head on his front paws, his eyes still fixed on Noah. "I think he approves," Laura said, smiling despite her exhaustion. Noah sat beside the dog, his small hand gently stroking the dirty fur. "I'll stay just until he falls asleep," he promised. Laura nodded, too tired to argue. "We'll be upstairs if you need us. Don't stay too long, okay?" Noah nodded solemnly, his attention already back on Max. Laura and David dragged themselves upstairs, both collapsing onto their bed, without even changing their muddy clothes. "What just happened?" Laura whispered into the silence. "Did our son really communicate with a dog? Lead us to rescue it in the middle of the night?" David stared at the ceiling, his expression unreadable. "I don't know what to believe anymore. 24 hours ago, I would have said it was impossible. But now," he trailed off, shaking his head in wonder. "He's always been different," Laura said softly. "More sensitive, more aware, but this takes it to a whole new level." "Maybe it was just an extraordinary coincidence," David suggested, but his tone lacked conviction. The dog's cries carried on the wind, and Noah heard them when we didn't. Laura turned to face him. "You don't really believe that?" David was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally admitted. "I don't." Before Laura could respond, they heard soft footsteps in the hallway, and then Noah appeared in their doorway, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Max is sleeping," he announced. "He said thank you for the blankets. They smell nice." Laura and David exchanged glances. That's good, honey," Laura managed. "Now you should get some sleep too." Noah nodded, already turning toward his own bedroom. "I told him we'd take care of his paw and help him get strong again, and that no one would hurt him anymore." Something in his words sent a chill down Laura's spine. "Hurt him? What do you mean, Noah?" Noah paused, his small face suddenly solemn. "Someone hurt him before. That's why he ran away. But he's safe now." Before either parent could question him further, Noah had disappeared into his bedroom, the door closing softly behind him. Laura sat up, suddenly wide awake despite her exhaustion. What did he mean by that? David shook his head, his expression troubled. "I don't know, but I think we need to find out more about this dog, where he came from, who he belonged to." "Tomorrow," Laura said, lying back down and closing her eyes. "We'll figure it all out tomorrow." But as she drifted off to sleep, Laura couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rescue, that Max wasn't just a lost dog, and that Noah's connection to him wasn't just a child's empathy for an animal in distress. Something else was at play here, something she couldn't yet understand. Laura woke with a start, her heart racing. The room was filled with afternoon light. They had slept for hours. But it wasn't the time that had jolted her awake. It was the sound. Barking, fierce, urgent barking from downstairs. She scrambled out of bed, David already on his feet and moving toward the door. They raced down the stairs, following the sound to the mudroom where they had left Max. The German Shepherd was on his feet, ignoring his injured paw, his hackles raised as he barked ferociously at the front door. His body was tense, his teeth bared in a snarl that transformed his normally gentle face into something fierce and protective. "Max, what's wrong?" Laura asked, her voice shaking. Noah appeared beside them, his hair tousled from sleep. "He's protecting us," he said matter-of-factly. David moved cautiously toward the front door, peering through the peephole. "I don't see anyone," he reported, his voice tight with tension. But Max's barking only intensified, his eyes fixed on the door, as if he could see through it to whatever threat lurked beyond. Noah, stay here with your mother, David instructed, reaching for the baseball bat they kept in the coat closet. I'm going to check outside. David, no! Laura protested, grabbing his arm. If someone dangerous is out there, I'll be careful, he promised, gently but firmly removing her hand. Lock the door behind me. Before Laura could argue further, David had slipped outside, the bat held ready in his hands. Laura quickly locked the door, then pulled Noah close to her side. It's okay, Mom, Noah said, his voice surprisingly calm. Max won't let anything bad happen to us. Laura looked down at the child, then at the dog, who had placed himself protectively in front of them both, still growling low in his throat, though his barking had stopped once David went outside. Noah, she said carefully, how do you know what Max is thinking? How can you understand him? Noah shrugged as if the answer was obvious. I just can. He talks to me in my head. Not with words exactly, but I can tell what he means. Before Laura could process this, they heard the front door opening again. Max tensed, ready to spring, until David's voice called out, It's just me. Everything's okay. Laura unlocked the door, relief flooding through her as David stepped back inside. Did you see anyone? David shook his head, his expression troubled. No, but... He hesitated, glancing at Noah. I did see footprints in the mud by the side of the house. Someone was definitely here, looking in through the windows. Laura's blood ran cold. Should we call the police? I already did, David assured her. They're sending a car over to check things out. Max had finally relaxed, sitting down heavily as the adrenaline left his system. He whined softly as the weight shifted to his injured paw. Noah immediately knelt beside him, stroking his head. You were so brave, he whispered. Thank you for warning us. Laura and David watched in amazement as the German Shepherd leaned into Noah's touch, his fierce protector persona melting away to reveal the gentle creature underneath. I think, David said slowly, that we need to reconsider our temporary arrangement. This dog just warned us about a potential intruder. He was ready to defend us, even with his injury. Laura nodded, her earlier reservations fading in the face of Max's protective instincts. You're right, he's not just a stray we rescued, he's already rescuing us back. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Officer Jenkins, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He listened to their story, examined the footprints David had found, and took notes in a small notepad. Could have been kids, he said when he'd finished his inspection. Or maybe someone casing houses in the neighborhood. We've had a few break-ins recently, about 2 streets over. Break-ins? Laura repeated, her hand automatically reaching for Noah's shoulder. Why haven't we heard about this? Officer Jenkins shrugged. The department didn't want to cause a panic. They've been pretty minor so far. Jewelry, electronics, nothing violent. But I'd recommend keeping your doors and windows locked, just to be safe. He glanced at Max, who was sitting alertly at Noah's side. That's a good-looking dog you've got there. German Shepherd? Yes, David confirmed. We, just got him. Noah opened his mouth as if to correct this simplification of their extraordinary night, but Laura squeezed his shoulder gently, and he remained silent. Well, he's a good choice for home security, Officer Jenkins said approvingly. These shepherd types are naturally protective. Loyalty's bred into them. After the officer left, promising to have patrols drive by their house more frequently for the next few days, the family settled in the living room, the events of the day leaving them too wired to go back to sleep, despite their lingering exhaustion. Max limped over to Noah, settling himself at the child's feet with a contented sigh. The bond between them was undeniable, growing stronger by the hour. I think we need to make this official, David said suddenly. If no one claims him, I mean... Laura looked at her husband in surprise. You want to adopt him? For real? David nodded, his expression resolute. He protected our home, Laura. He was ready to defend Noah, even injured, and clearly there's some kind of connection between them that I can't explain. Noah's face lit up with hope. Really, Dad? We can keep him? If no one claims him, David cautioned, we still need to follow the proper procedures, put up notices, check with shelters. He might have a family looking for him. Noah shook his head firmly. He doesn't, he told me. His old owner was a nice man, but he died. Max ran away after that because the other men were mean to him. Laura and David exchanged glances, a silent question passing between them. How much of this should they believe? Well, Laura said carefully, we'll still need to check, honey. It's the right thing to do. Noah didn't argue, but his hand tightened in Max's fur. He belongs with us now, he said with quiet certainty. As if in agreement, Max thumped his tail against the floor. In the meantime, Laura continued, practical concerns taking over, we need to get some supplies, dog food, a proper bed, a leash, everything Max will need while he stays with us. Can I help pick things out? Noah asked eagerly. Laura smiled, ruffling his hair. Of course. We want Max to feel at home here. David stood up, stretching. I'll run to the pet store now, make a list of what we need while I get cleaned up. As David headed upstairs to shower and change, Laura found a notepad and began listing the essentials. Noah sat beside her, occasionally offering suggestions that seemed to come directly from Max himself. He likes soft things, Noah informed her. His old bed was blue. Laura added soft blue dog bed to the list, deciding not to question how Noah could possibly know this. After the night they'd had, anything seemed possible. And he doesn't like the food in cans, Noah continued seriously. It makes his tummy hurt. He likes the dry kind with the little meats mixed in. Laura dutifully noted this down, along with large ceramic water bowl and sturdy leash and collar. By the time David returned, freshly showered and looking more like himself, they had compiled a comprehensive list of supplies. I'll be back in an hour or so, he promised, taking the list and scanning it quickly. Anything else we need while I'm out? Maybe some dog shampoo, Laura suggested, eyeing Max's still muddy coat. He could really use a bath. At the word bath, Max's ears flattened against his head, and he let out a low groan that was almost human in its dismay. Noah giggled. He hates baths. David laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. Don't we all, buddy? But sometimes they're necessary. After David left, Laura decided it was time to address her own cleanliness. I'm going to take a quick shower, she told Noah. Will you two be okay down here for a few minutes? Noah nodded, already settling on the floor beside Max, their heads close together, as if sharing secrets. Laura paused at the foot of the stairs, watching them. There was something almost magical about the bond they shared, something that defied rational explanation. Should she be worried? Or was this simply one of those beautiful mysteries of childhood that adults had forgotten how to understand? With a sigh, she headed upstairs, hoping that a hot shower would help clear her mind. When she returned 15 minutes later, feeling refreshed and more like herself, she found Noah and Max exactly where she'd left them. Only now Noah was reading aloud from one of his picture books, and Max was watching him attentively, as if hanging on every word. And the little bear found his way home, Noah was saying, his finger tracing the words on the page. His mother was waiting for him with open arms. I knew you would come back, she said. I never stopped looking for you. The end. Max made a soft wuffing sound, nudging Noah's hand with his nose. I know, Noah said, responding to some communication only he could hear. It's a good ending, the best kind. Laura cleared her throat, announcing her presence. That's one of your favorites, isn't it? Noah looked up, smiling. Max liked it too, especially the part where the mother bear never gave up looking. Laura sat down on the couch near them. Noah, she said gently, can we talk about Max? About how you can understand him? Noah didn't seem surprised by the question. He simply nodded, closing the book and setting it aside. It's like listening, but not with your ears, more like with your heart. He doesn't use words like we do, but I can tell what he means. Laura tried to wrap her mind around this explanation. And has this heart listening happened with other animals before? Noah thought about it, his forehead creasing in concentration. Sometimes, like with Mrs. Peterson's cat when she got stuck in the tree. She was telling everyone she was scared, but no one was listening right. Or that baby bird we found last summer. He was calling for his mom. Laura remembered these incidents, Noah's insistence that the cat was too scared to come down on her own, his certainty about where the baby bird's nest was located. At the time, she'd attributed his insights to a child's natural empathy and imagination. Now, she wasn't so sure. And Max? What does he tell you? Noah stroked the German shepherd's head, his expression solemn. Lots of things. That he was lonely for a long time. That he's happy we found him. That he wants to keep us safe. Max pressed closer to Noah's side, as if confirming these sentiments. "Noah," Laura said carefully, "earlier you said that someone hurt Max. What did you mean by that?" Noah's face darkened. His first owner was nice, an old man who lived alone. Max loved him a lot. But then the man got sick and died. Some other men came to the house after that. They weren't nice. One of them kicked Max and hit him with a stick. Laura gasped, her heart twisting at the thought of anyone abusing this gentle animal. "That's terrible." Noah nodded, his eyes sad. Max ran away after that. He was living in the woods for a while, but it was hard to find food. Then the storm came, and he fell down the cliff. "And somehow, he called to you for help," Laura whispered, the reality of their extraordinary connection finally sinking in. "He didn't think anyone would hear him," Noah said. "But I did." Max whined softly, nuzzling Noah's hand with his nose. The gentle gesture said more than words ever could. Laura watched them, 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. Who were the men who had come to the old man's house? Why had they mistreated Max? And most importantly, was there more to this story than just a lost dog and a sensitive child? The sound of the front door opening interrupted her thoughts. David was back, his arms laden with shopping bags. "I think I bought out half the store," he announced, setting the bags down on the floor. Who knew dogs needed so much stuff? Max's ears perked up at the rustling of the bags. His curiosity piqued. "Did you get everything on the list?" Noah asked eagerly, peering into the nearest bag. "And then some," David admitted with a sheepish grin. The sales associate was very persuasive. They spent the next hour unpacking their haul, a plush dog bed in navy blue, just as Noah had specified, stainless steel food and water bowls, a variety of toys, a sturdy leash and collar, high-quality dog food, treats, grooming supplies, and even a doggy first aid kit for Max's healing paw. Max watched the proceedings with interest, his tail thumping whenever Noah showed him a new toy or treat. Despite his earlier ordeal, he seemed to be regaining his strength, his eyes bright and alert. "I think," David said, as they finished arranging Max's new bed in the corner of the living room, "that it's time we tackled the bath situation." Max groaned again, laying his head on his paws in a clear display of reluctance. "He really doesn't like baths," Noah explained again, his expression sympathetic. "But he knows he needs one." Laura couldn't help but smile at the dog's all-too-human reaction. "Well, let's make it as painless as possible. We'll use the downstairs shower. It's bigger, and the handheld sprayer will make it easier." They coaxed Max into the bathroom, Noah leading the way with encouraging words and gentle pats. The dog's injured paw meant they had to be especially careful, keeping the bandage dry while washing the rest of him. To Laura's surprise, Max was remarkably cooperative despite his obvious dislike of the process. He stood patiently in the shower stall, allowing David to wet his fur while Laura worked the dog shampoo into a rich lather. Noah sat on the closed toilet lid, offering a stream of encouragement. "You're being so brave, Max. The soap smells good, doesn't it? Just a little longer, and then you'll be all clean and feel much better." By the time they finished, the bathroom looked like it had been hit by a small tsunami, but Max was transformed. His coat, freed from mud and debris, gleamed in rich shades of brown and black. His true coloring was revealed, a classic German shepherd pattern, with a black saddle over his back and rich tan legs, chest, and face. "He's beautiful," Laura marveled as they toweled him dry in the living room. "He knows," Noah said with a grin. "He says thank you for the bath, even though it was scary." Max shook himself vigorously, sending droplets of water in all directions, then limped over to inspect his new bed. After a cautious sniff, he stepped onto the plush surface, turned around 3 times, and settled down with a contented sigh that seemed to say, "This will do nicely." As evening approached, they settled into a new routine, as if Max had always been part of their family. David prepared dinner, while Laura helped Noah with his homework at the kitchen table. Max lay nearby, his watchful eyes tracking their movements, his ears perking up at every sound from outside. When dinner was ready, they faced their first dilemma. Where should Max eat? "He can have his food in the kitchen with us," Noah suggested hopefully. Laura hesitated, her ingrained sense of order conflicting with her growing affection for the dog. "Well, usually pets eat in their own space." But the pleading look in Noah's eyes, mirrored somehow in Max's soulful gaze, broke down her resistance. "Oh, all right, just this once. but he eats from his bowl on the floor, not at the table. Noah beamed, running to fill Max's new bowl with the premium dog food David had purchased. He set it carefully on a mat in the corner of the kitchen, then filled the water bowl and placed it beside the food. "There you go, Max," he said proudly. "Your first dinner in your new home." Max approached the bowl, sniffed appreciatively, then looked up at Noah as if seeking permission. "Go ahead," Noah encouraged. "It's all for you." The German Shepherd began to eat, his movements careful and deliberate, pausing occasionally to glance around the room as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. As the family ate their own dinner, a comfortable silence fell over the kitchen. It felt right somehow, having Max there, as if a missing piece had finally clicked into place. "I called the shelter while I was out," David said eventually, breaking the silence. "They're going to post Max's information on their lost and found board, and I put up notices at the vet clinic and the pet store." Noah's face fell. "But what if someone claims him? Someone bad?" Laura reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "We'd make sure they were good people, honey. We wouldn't let Max go to anyone who might hurt him." "But he belongs with us," Noah insisted, his voice rising slightly. "He chose us!" Max lifted his head from his food bowl, instantly alert to Noah's distress. He limped over to the child's side, pressing his body against Noah's legs in a gesture of comfort. "See?" Noah said, his hand dropping to stroke Max's head. "He knows this is his home now." Laura and David exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the undeniable bond between their son and the dog. After what they'd witnessed in the past 24 hours, it was hard to argue with Noah's certainty. "Let's just take it one day at a time," David suggested gently. "For now, Max is safe here with us. That's what matters most." Noah seemed to accept this compromise, turning his attention back to his dinner. Max remained by his side, vigilant and protective, his eyes occasionally drifting to the window, as if keeping watch for unseen threats. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed, they faced another decision. Where would Max sleep? "He can stay in my room," Noah said immediately. "There's plenty of space for his bed next to mine." Laura was about to object. They had already bent several of their rules today, but David caught her eye and gave a slight nod. "Just for tonight," Laura conceded. "We'll see how it goes." Noah's face lit up with delight. He helped David carry Max's new bed upstairs to his room, positioning it perfectly beside his own. As Laura tucked Noah in, Max settled onto his bed, his large body curling into a comfortable circle, his eyes fixed on the child with unwavering devotion. "Sleep well, sweetheart," Laura whispered, dropping a kiss on Noah's forehead. "You've had quite an adventure today." Noah yawned, his eyes already heavy with sleep. Max says goodnight too, and thank you for saving him. Laura smiled, reaching down to gently stroke the German Shepherd's head. "I think he's the one who saved us in a way." She turned off the light, leaving the door slightly ajar, and joined David in the hallway. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" she whispered as they walked to their own bedroom. "Getting so attached when we might have to give him up?" David wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I think we're following our hearts, and after what happened today, Max warning us about someone lurking outside, I'm not sure I want to let him go anyway." Laura nodded, leaning into his embrace. "There's something special about him, about his connection with Noah. I can't explain it, but I feel it." "Then let's trust that feeling," David suggested, "and see where it leads us." As they settled into bed, Laura found herself listening for any sounds from Noah's room. But all was quiet. Noah and Max were sleeping peacefully, guardian in charge, each protecting the other in their own way. What Laura didn't know, as she drifted off to sleep, was that someone was watching their house from the darkness across the street, someone who had a very particular interest in the German Shepherd they had rescued, and that their peaceful night was merely the calm before a storm none of them could have anticipated. Have you ever felt an unexplainable connection with an animal? Could Noah's ability to communicate with Max be real, or is there another explanation for their extraordinary bond? The night passed peacefully, but Laura slept fitfully, her dreams filled with shadowy figures lurking outside their windows. She woke several times, straining her ears for any unusual sounds, but the house remained silent. Each time she drifted back to sleep, one thought comforted her: Max was standing guard. When morning finally came, Laura rose early, padding quietly down the hallway to check on Noah. She gently pushed his door open and felt her heart melt at the sight that greeted her. Noah was fast asleep, one arm dangling off the bed, his small fingers just brushing Max's fur. The German shepherd was wide awake, his intelligent eyes meeting Laura's gaze immediately. He made no move to rise, clearly unwilling to disturb the sleeping child, but his tail thumped once against the floor in quiet acknowledgement. "Good boy," Laura whispered. "Thank you for watching over him." Max's ears perked up at her words, and something in his expression, could a dog have expressions, seemed to say, "Always." Laura closed the door softly and headed downstairs to start breakfast. The events of the past 2 days had left her feeling off balance, as if her understanding of the world had shifted on its axis. Her practical, logical mind struggled to make sense of Noah's apparent ability to communicate with Max, of the dog's uncanny intelligence, of the whole extraordinary sequence of events that had brought them together. As she cracked eggs into a bowl, Laura's thoughts turned to the footprints David had found outside their house. Who had been watching them? Was it just a coincidence, or was there some connection to Max? The dog's reaction had been so immediate, so protective. It was almost as if he recognized a specific threat, not just a generic intruder. Lost in these troubling thoughts, Laura didn't hear David coming downstairs until he was right behind her. "Hey," he said softly, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Everything okay? You look worried." Laura leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Just thinking about yesterday, about those footprints, about Max's reaction." David nodded, his chin brushing the top of her head. "I know, it's been on my mind too. I'm going to call Officer Jenkins again today, see if there's been any progress on those break-ins he mentioned." "Good idea," Laura agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "David, about Max, do you really think Noah can communicate with him somehow? Or are we just seeing what we want to see?" David was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know how to explain what's happening," he said finally. "But I saw Noah lead us directly to a dog stranded on a mountainside in the middle of the night. I saw Max respond to him in ways that don't seem normal. And honestly, at this point, I'm more inclined to trust what I'm seeing than to dismiss it, just because it doesn't fit what I think I know about the world." Laura smiled, grateful for his perspective. "You're right. Whatever's happening between them, it's real and special." The sound of paws on the hardwood floor announced Max's arrival in the kitchen. He moved more easily this morning, his limp less pronounced as his injured paw continued to heal. Noah followed close behind, still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in all directions. "Morning," he mumbled sleepily, sliding into his chair at the table. "Max needed to go outside. Did you let him out?" Laura asked, turning back to the stove. Noah nodded. "Just for a minute. He stayed right by the door, and I watched the whole time." Max settled on the floor beside Noah's chair, his posture alert but relaxed, a guardian at rest but ever vigilant. "Dad," Noah said suddenly, his expression serious. "Max says someone was outside again last night, late, when we were all sleeping." David and Laura exchanged alarmed glances. "What do you mean, buddy?" David asked carefully. "He heard them walking around the house. He wanted to bark and wake us up, but he didn't want to scare them away before we could catch them. So, he just watched." Laura felt a chill run down her spine. "Noah, honey, how do you know this? Did Max actually tell you?" Noah nodded, entirely matter of fact. "He showed me pictures in my head. A man with a dark jacket, looking in windows." David was already moving toward the front door. "I'm going to check outside again." Laura watched him go, her heart pounding. Could this be real? Could Max have actually communicated such specific information to Noah? Noah seemed unfazed by their reaction, calmly petting Max's head. "He's a good guard dog," he said proudly. "Nothing bad will happen to us with him here." David returned a few minutes later, his expression grim. Fresh footprints in the flower beds under the living room windows, different from yesterday, larger shoe size. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. "I'm calling Jenkins right now." While David made the call in the other room, Laura served breakfast, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy despite her growing unease. Noah ate hungrily, occasionally slipping small pieces of bacon to Max under the table when he thought Laura wasn't looking. She pretended not to notice, her maternal concerns about proper pet etiquette overshadowed by more pressing worries. David returned, his conversation with Officer Jenkins complete. "He's sending someone over to take another look," he reported, sitting down at the table. Says there have been 2 more attempted break-ins in the neighborhood since yesterday. That's scary, Laura said, glancing at Noah, who was listening intently. Did they catch anyone? David shook his head. No, but there's an interesting twist. In both cases, the homeowners reported being alerted by a dog barking, but neither family owns a dog. Noah's eyes widened. A dog stopped the bad guys? That's what it sounds like, David confirmed. Jenkins said one homeowner looked outside after hearing barking and saw a large dog chasing someone off their property. By the time they got outside, both the dog and the intruder were gone. What kind of dog? Noah asked eagerly. They weren't sure. It was dark and they only got a glimpse, but they thought it was a big dog with pointed ears. Noah immediately turned to Max. Was that you? He whispered. Max made no sound, but his intelligent eyes seemed to hold an answer that satisfied Noah. It was him, Noah announced confidently. He was protecting the neighborhood before he fell down the cliff. Laura and David exchanged glances again, a silent conversation passing between them. The idea was fantastic, implausible, and yet, after everything they had witnessed, not entirely beyond belief. Well, Laura said finally, it seems we have our very own neighborhood hero staying with us. Max's tail thumped against the floor, his eyes bright with what looked remarkably like pride. After breakfast, David drove to work, reluctantly leaving only after Laura assured him she would keep the doors locked and stay alert. Noah was supposed to go to school, but after the excitement and disruption of the past few days, Laura decided he could stay home for one more day. The truth was, she felt safer with both Noah and Max nearby. The morning passed quietly. Laura worked from her home office while Noah played in the living room, Max never more than a few feet from his side. Around noon, the doorbell rang, startling Laura from her concentration. Max was instantly alert, moving to stand protectively in front of Noah, but he didn't bark or growl, which Laura took as a good sign. Stay here, she told Noah, making her way cautiously to the front door. Through the peephole, she saw Officer Jenkins standing on their porch. Relief flooded through her as she unlocked the door. Ma'am, Jenkins greeted her with a professional nod. Just following up on those footprints your husband reported. Mind if I take a look around? Not at all, Laura said, stepping aside to let him in. We've been a little on edge with all this happening. Jenkins entered, immediately noticing Max, who watched him with attentive but non-threatening interest. That's the shepherd you mentioned yesterday? Handsome animal. Yes, this is Max, Laura confirmed. Noah found him. Well, it's a long story, but he's been very protective. Jenkins nodded approvingly. Best security system you can get, a dog like that. They've got instincts you can't buy in any alarm system. He knelt, extending his hand palm down for Max to sniff. The German Shepherd approached cautiously, his nose working, then gave the officer's hand a brief lick as if granting permission. Good judge of character, too, Jenkins said with a smile, standing back up. Well, I've examined those footprints. They're definitely suspicious, made by someone who was trying to look in your windows. But without more to go on, there's not much we can do except increase patrols in the area. What about the other break-ins you mentioned? Laura asked. The ones where a dog scared off the intruder? Jenkins's expression grew thoughtful. Strange situation that. Nobody can figure out where this mystery dog came from. Some folks are saying it's been appearing at houses just before they're targeted, like some kind of guardian angel with 4 legs. Noah, who had been quietly listening from the living room, piped up. That's because Max was protecting everyone. Jenkins turned to the child, his eyebrow raised. Is that right, young man? Noah nodded vigorously. He was living in the woods after his owner died. He saw bad men watching houses, so he started barking to scare them away. The officer chuckled, clearly charmed by Noah's imagination. Well, that would explain it. Kind of like a superhero dog, huh? It's true, Noah insisted. Max told me. Jenkins' smile softened. You've got quite a bond with your new dog. I can see that. Laura felt a familiar tension, the awkwardness of trying to explain Noah's unusual abilities without sounding delusional. Noah has a special way with animals, she said carefully, especially Max. To her relief, Jenkins just nodded, not pursuing the topic further. Well, I should get back to my patrol. You folks keep your doors locked, and if you see or hear anything suspicious, don't hesitate to call. That dog of yours will probably alert you before anything happens anyway. After the officer left, Laura found herself staring thoughtfully at Max, who had returned to Noah's side. Could it really be true? Had Max been some kind of canine vigilante protecting the neighborhood from thieves? Noah, she said slowly, when you say Max told you he was protecting the neighborhood, what exactly did he show you? Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, one hand absently stroking Max's fur. He showed me the men watching houses. They would come at night, looking in windows to see if people had nice things to steal. Max would hide and watch them, then bark really loud to scare them away before they could break in. The specificity of the answer sent a shiver down Laura's spine. This wasn't the vague imagination of a child. This was detailed, consistent information that aligned perfectly with what Officer Jenkins had reported. "Did Max show you anything else?" she asked, sitting down beside them. "About his old owner, maybe?" Noah's expression grew solemn. His name was Richard. He was old and had white hair. He lived in a little house near the woods. He was very kind to Max and gave him special treats. But then he got sick and had to go to the hospital. When he didn't come home, Max waited and waited. Laura's heart ached at the simple, poignant story. And then, what happened? Other men came to the house. They were looking for something. They were mean to Max and kicked him. So he ran away to the woods. But he still went back to check on Richard's house sometimes, to see if he came home. Laura found herself blinking back tears. The story rang with a truth that transcended skepticism. Somehow, Noah was accessing Max's memories, his experiences, his very thoughts. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart," she said softly, reaching out to stroke Max's head. "I'm so sorry for what you went through, Max. But you're safe now. You're with us." Max leaned into her touch, his warm brown eyes holding hers for a long moment. In that gaze, Laura felt she could almost glimpse the understanding, the gratitude, the emotion that seemed too complex for an animal, and yet was undeniably there. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. David came home early, bringing with him a special orthopedic bed for Max, an upgrade from the regular dog bed they had purchased the day before. "The guy at the pet store recommended it for dogs with injuries," he explained as he set it up in the living room. "Should be more comfortable for his paw." Max approached the new bed cautiously, sniffing it thoroughly before stepping onto its memory foam surface. He turned in a circle 3 times, then settled down with a contented sigh that left no doubt about his approval. Noah beamed. "He says it's perfect, Dad. Thank you." David ruffled Noah's hair, a smile spreading across his face. "You're welcome, buddy, both of you." As they sat down to dinner that evening, a sense of comfortable familiarity had already developed around Max's presence in their home. It was hard to believe he'd only been with them for 2 days. It felt as if he'd always been there. A missing piece they hadn't known was missing until they found it. "I was thinking," David said as they finished their meal, "I should try to find out more about Max's previous owner. If Noah's right and his name was Richard, maybe we can get some information about him. Closure, you know?" Laura nodded, understanding his intention. "That's a good idea. How would you go about it, though?" "Well, we found Max not far from the West Hill neighborhood. Maybe start there. Ask around about an older man named Richard who had a German shepherd." "Richard Walker," Noah interjected calmly, taking a sip of his milk. Both adults turned to stare at him. "What did you say, honey?" Laura asked. "His full name was Richard Walker. He lived at 156 Pinecrest Road. He was a soldier a long time ago." The precise details left Laura and David momentarily speechless. Finally, David cleared his throat. "Noah, how do you know all that?" Noah shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "Max showed me. He remembers the address because Richard always said it when they went for walks, in case Max got lost and someone found his collar. But Max's collar fell off in the woods." David looked at Laura, his expression a mixture of amazement and confusion. I guess I could look up that address, see if there really was a Richard Walker living there." "Please do," Laura said quietly. "I think we need to understand more about where Max came from, especially with someone lurking around our house." After dinner, while Noah helped Laura clean up the kitchen, David went to his home office to do some research. He returned 30 minutes later, his expression troubled. "I found him," he announced, sitting down heavily at the kitchen table. "Richard Walker, age 78, lived at 156 Pinecrest Road. He was a retired Army colonel." David paused, glancing at Noah, who was listening intently. "He died 4 months ago. Heart attack." Laura gasped softly. "So Noah was right." David nodded, his forehead creased with concern. That's not all. According to the local news archives, there were some unusual circumstances around his death. The house was broken into the same night he died. Police suspected the shock of the break-in might have triggered his heart attack. Noah's eyes filled with tears. The bad men scared him, and his heart stopped working. That's why Max hates them so much. Max, who had been lying quietly nearby, raised his head at the mention of his name, a low growl rumbling in his throat. David continued, his voice low. The article said the burglars were never caught, and that Walker's German Shepherd disappeared the night of the break-in. They assumed the dog ran away during the commotion. Laura's mind was racing. But why would someone be watching our house now? Could it be the same people who broke into Richard's home? I don't know, David admitted. It seems like a strange coincidence otherwise. Maybe ... He hesitated, glancing at Noah. Maybe what, Dad? Noah prompted. David sighed. Maybe they're after Max for some reason. Maybe he saw something that night, something that could identify them. Noah's arms immediately went around Max's neck, protective and fierce. They can't have him. He's ours now. Of course they can't, Laura assured him quickly, though uncertainty gnawed at her. No one's going to take Max away from us. But as the evening wore on, an uneasy feeling settled over the household. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of branches against windows seemed suddenly ominous. Max remained alert, his ears constantly swiveling toward the slightest sound, his body tense with readiness. When bedtime came, there was no question of Max sleeping anywhere but in Noah's room. Laura and David took extra precautions, checking every window and door twice before heading upstairs. Should we call the police again? Laura whispered as they prepared for bed. Tell them what we found out about Richard Walker? David considered this. We can, but what would we say? That our dog used to belong to a man who died during a burglary 4 months ago, and now we think the same burglars are watching our house? It sounds far-fetched. But if it's true... I know, David sighed, rubbing his temples. Let's sleep on it, see if anything else happens. Max will alert us if someone tries to get in. Laura nodded, though sleep seemed like a distant possibility given her churning thoughts. As she lay in bed beside David, listening to the quiet house, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important, some crucial piece of the puzzle that would explain why Max had come into their lives, and why someone might be watching them. In the middle of the night, Laura was torn from a fitful sleep by a sound that made her blood run cold. Max barking, the sound ferocious and urgent. She bolted upright, David already out of bed and grabbing the baseball bat from beside the nightstand. Noah! Laura gasped, throwing off the covers and racing toward their son's room. The hallway was dark, but she could see Noah's door was open, light spilling out from within. She rushed inside to find Noah sitting up in bed, his eyes wide with fear, and Max standing at the window, his teeth bared in a snarl as he barked at something outside. What is it? Laura cried, pulling Noah into her arms. What's happening? Someone's out there, Noah whispered, trembling against her. Max says it's one of the bad men from Richard's house. Max's barking intensified, his body rigid with protective fury. Laura held Noah tighter, fear and anger battling within her. How dare someone terrorize them like this? How dare they frighten her child? I'm calling 911, she said, reaching for the phone on Noah's nightstand. But before she could dial, Max suddenly stopped barking. His entire demeanor changed in an instant, his body tensing in a different way, not with rage, but with intent. Before anyone could react, he launched himself at the window screen, tearing through it with the force of his powerful body, and disappeared into the night. Max! Noah screamed, breaking free from Laura's arms and rushing to the window. David caught him before he could lean out the broken screen. Stay here, he ordered, already moving toward the bedroom door. I'm going after him. Laura, call the police now. Laura dialed with shaking fingers, her heart pounding so hard she could barely speak when the dispatcher answered. She reported an intruder on their property, a dog in pursuit, her husband following. The dispatcher promised to send officers immediately. Mom, we have to help Max, Noah pleaded, tears streaming down his face. The bad man might hurt him. The police are coming, sweetheart, Laura assured him, though her own fear was nearly overwhelming. And Dad's going to find Max. They'll be okay. But as the minutes ticked by with no sign of David returning, Laura's confidence began to waver. What if the intruder was armed? What if Max or David was injured? The possibilities tortured her as she held Noah, both of them staring out the broken window into the darkness beyond. After what felt like an eternity, they heard the wail of approaching sirens. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, growing brighter as police cars raced up their street. "See," Laura said, trying to sound reassuring. "Help is here. Everything's going to be okay." But Noah wasn't listening. His head was tilted to one side, his expression distant, as if he was hearing something beyond Laura's perception. "Noah? What is it?" "Max caught him," Noah whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "He's holding him down until Dad and the police get there. He says not to worry." Laura wanted desperately to believe this was true, that Noah's mysterious connection with Max was providing real information rather than just a child's hopeful imagination. She held him closer, watching the police cars pull up in front of their house, officers spilling out with flashlights and urgent movements. And then, emerging from the darkness at the edge of their property, came David. He was walking slowly, one hand raised to signal the police, the other gripping something, no, someone, by the collar, and trotting beside them, head held high with unmistakable pride, was Max. "They got him," Laura breathed, relief washing over her like a tidal wave. "They really got him." Noah's tears turned to a smile of pure joy. "I told you, Max is a hero." As they watched from the window, the police took the struggling figure from David. Flashlights illuminated the scene. A man in dark clothing, his face contorted with anger as he was handcuffed and led to a waiting police car. Max stayed at David's side, his posture alert but calm, mission accomplished. Laura felt a surge of fierce love for this extraordinary dog who had protected their family with such courage and devotion. Whatever mysterious abilities he and Noah shared, whatever strange circumstances had brought them together, one thing was now absolutely clear. Max wasn't just a pet they had rescued. He was family. What they didn't know yet was that the man Max had caught was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that centered around something hidden in Richard Walker's house. Something the intruders had never found. Something that only Max knew about. And before this was over, the German Shepherd would lead them to a discovery that would change all their lives forever. Who do you think the intruder was looking for? What could Richard Walker have hidden that was so important people would still be searching for it months after his death? "I still can't believe what happened," Laura whispered as she and David stood in their kitchen, watching through the window as police officers combed their yard for evidence. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and gold, but neither of them had slept since the dramatic events of the night. Noah had finally fallen asleep on the couch, emotionally exhausted, with Max lying protectively on the floor beside him. The German Shepherd, despite his own exhaustion, remained alert, his ears perking up at every sound from outside. "How did he do it?" Laura continued, clutching her coffee mug for warmth. "How did Max manage to take down a grown man?" David shook his head in wonder. "The officer said Max caught him by the pants leg and wouldn't let go. Knocked him down and just held him there, growling whenever he tried to move. By the time I caught up to them, the guy was too terrified to even try escaping." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "It wasn't random, Laura. The way Max went after him, it was personal." "Noah said it was one of the men from Richard Walker's house," Laura recalled, her voice low to avoid waking their son. "One of the men who was there the night Richard died. If that's true," David began, then stopped as Officer Jenkins approached their back door. Laura quickly let him in, noticing the grim satisfaction on his face. "We got him," Jenkins announced without preamble. "Guy's name is Marcus Reeves, petty criminal with a sheet full of burglary charges." "Has he said why he was watching our house?" David asked. Jenkins nodded. "That's the interesting part. He claims he was hired to recover something, a key that supposedly belongs to your dog." "A key?" Laura repeated, bewildered. "What kind of key?" "He's being vague about it," Jenkins admitted. "But he did confirm he was at Richard Walker's house the night the old man died. Says he and his partner were hired by someone to find a key that Walker had hidden. They thought the dog might have it on his collar." David and Laura exchanged stunned glances. "Noah told us Max's collar fell off in the woods," Laura said slowly. "But why would anyone think a dog would have a key?" Jenkins shrugged. Rich folks do strange things, hide valuable keys in unexpected places. Reeves claims this key opens something important, something valuable enough that his employer is still looking for it 4 months later. Max had risen from his spot near Noah and padded silently into the kitchen, his intelligent eyes fixed on Jenkins as if he understood every word. "The thing is," Jenkins continued, "Reeves says he's scared, claims his employer is dangerous, more dangerous than prison. He's willing to cooperate if we offer protection." "So, what happens now?" David asked, instinctively reaching down to stroke Max's head. "We keep investigating, but I wanted to warn you, if Reeves is telling the truth, there could be others looking for your dog, more dangerous people than him." Jenkins' expression was serious. "You might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days." Laura's arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Leave our home? That feels like letting them win." "I understand, ma'am, but with a child in the house." Jenkins let the implication hang in the air. David nodded slowly. "We'll think about it. In the meantime, what about the key? Should we be looking for it?" Jenkins sighed. "Honestly, we're not even sure it exists. Could be Reeves making up stories to get a better deal. But if you find anything unusual..." He handed David his card. "Call me directly." After Jenkins left, Laura and David stood in silent contemplation, both watching Max, who had returned to Noah's side, as if sensing the boy might wake soon. "A key," Laura murmured. "What could it possibly open?" David rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Whatever it is, it's valuable enough that people are still looking for it months later. And they believe Max knows where it is." Noah stirred on the couch, his eyes fluttering open. "Mom? Dad?" he called sleepily. "What's happening?" Laura went to sit beside him, smoothing his tousled hair. "The police caught the bad man, sweetheart. He can't bother us anymore." Noah nodded, not surprised. "Max told me. He says there are more bad men, though. They're still looking for the key." David and Laura exchanged startled glances. "Noah," David said carefully, kneeling down to be at eye level with his son. "Do you know anything about a key? Did Max show you anything about it?" Noah's forehead creased in concentration. "He doesn't have the key, but he knows where it is." The boy turned to the German shepherd, who was watching him intently. "Don't you, Max?" Max woofed softly, then stood up, stretching his powerful body before padding to the front door. There, he sat down and looked back at them expectantly. "I think he wants to go somewhere," Noah said, throwing off his blanket and standing up. "He wants to show us something." "Now?" Laura asked, glancing at the clock. "Noah, it's barely 7 a.m., and none of us have had much sleep." "It's important, Mom," Noah insisted, his young face suddenly serious beyond his years. "Max says we need to go now, before anyone else figures it out." David hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Let's go. If Max really does know where this key is, the sooner we find it, the sooner this whole situation is resolved." Laura wanted to argue, to insist on more time to think this through, but the urgent look in Max's eyes gave her pause. There was something almost human in his gaze, a knowledge, a purpose that transcended animal instinct. "All right," she conceded, "but we'll take the car, and we stay together. No wandering off." They quickly dressed and gathered their essentials. David contacted Officer Jenkins, informing him of their plan to follow Max's lead. Jenkins was skeptical, but agreed to meet them at Richard Walker's old house if their search led them there. As they piled into the car, Max sitting alertly in the back seat next to Noah, Laura couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of their situation. They were following the instincts of a dog, chasing a mysterious key that might not even exist, all because of their 5-year-old son's apparent ability to communicate with animals. And yet, after everything they'd witnessed in the past few days, it somehow felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Where to?" David asked, turning to look at Noah and Max. Noah closed his eyes briefly, his face scrunched in concentration as if listening to something only he could hear. Then his eyes snapped open. "Richard's house," he said confidently. "Max says we need to go there first." David nodded, punching the address into their GPS. 156 Pinecrest Road it is. As they drove through the quiet morning streets, Laura's mind raced with questions. What could this key possibly open? Why was it so valuable that people would break into their home to find it? And most puzzling of all, how had their ordinary family become entangled in such an extraordinary mystery? Richard Walker's house turned out to be a modest bungalow set back from the road, partially hidden by tall pine trees that gave Pinecrest Road its name. The property looked neglected, with overgrown grass and newspapers piled on the porch, clear signs that no one had lived there for months. As they pulled into the driveway, Laura noticed Max's demeanor change. The German Shepherd sat up straighter, his ears perked forward, his body tense with what seemed like a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "This is it," Noah whispered, placing a comforting hand on Max's back. "This is where you used to live with Richard." Max whined softly, pressing against Noah's side as if seeking reassurance. "It's okay," Noah said gently. "I know you miss him, but we're here to help finish what he started, right?" Officer Jenkins was already waiting for them, his patrol car parked at the curb. He approached as they got out of their vehicle, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I still think this is a wild goose chase," he said by way of greeting. "But I've learned not to underestimate that dog of yours." Max ignored the officer, his attention fixed on the house. He moved forward purposefully, leading them up the porch steps to the front door. "It's locked," David said unnecessarily, trying the handle. Jenkins produced a key. "Got this from the department. The house is still part of an open investigation, technically. Walker has no next of kin, so it's been in limbo since he died." As soon as the door swung open, Max darted inside, Noah following close behind before Laura could stop him. The adults hurried after them, stepping into a time capsule of Richard Walker's life. The house was neat but dated, with furniture from the 1980s and walls covered in military memorabilia. Photos of a younger Richard in uniform hung alongside medals and certificates of commendation. In several of the pictures, a younger version of Max sat proudly at Richard's side. "He was a war hero," David murmured, examining one of the framed medals. "Silver Star. That's not given out lightly." Max had moved to the center of the living room, turning in a circle as if reacquainting himself with his old home. Then, with sudden purpose, he trotted down a hallway toward the back of the house. "He knows exactly where he's going," Noah said, hurrying after him. They followed Max into what appeared to be Richard's study, a small room lined with bookshelves and dominated by an old wooden desk. The German Shepherd went straight to the desk, placing his front paws on its surface and whining urgently. "Something in the desk?" David wondered, moving forward to examine it. He pulled open the drawers one by one, finding nothing but ordinary office supplies and paperwork. Max grew visibly frustrated, barking sharply and pawing at the desk's surface. "Wait," Noah said, watching Max intently. "It's not in the desk. It's—" He closed his eyes again, that now familiar look of concentration crossing his face. "It's under the desk. There's a hidden compartment." David immediately dropped to his knees, running his hands along the underside of the desk. His fingers found an irregularity, a small, almost imperceptible seam in the wood. "There's something here," he confirmed, his voice tight with excitement. "But I can't figure out how to open it." Max barked again, then looked pointedly at Noah. "You have to press the corner and slide it," Noah translated, kneeling beside his father. "Like this." His small hands demonstrated, pressing on the right corner of the hidden panel, then sliding it to the left. To everyone's amazement, the panel moved smoothly, revealing a shallow compartment built into the underside of the desk. Inside lay a single object, a small, ornate key made of what appeared to be solid gold. "That's it," Jenkins breathed, leaning in for a closer look. "That's what Reeves was talking about." David carefully removed the key, holding it up to the light. It was intricately designed, with what looked like tiny symbols engraved along its shaft. "But what does it open?" Laura wondered aloud, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Max wasn't finished. He moved to a bookshelf against the far wall, scratching at its base and whining insistently. "There's more," Noah said, following him. "Something behind the bookshelf." Jenkins helped David move the heavy bookcase away from the wall, revealing a small safe embedded in the plaster. Its door was solid metal, with a simple keyhole, a keyhole that looked exactly the right size for the golden key in David's hand. "Should we open it?" David asked, looking to Jenkins for guidance. The officer hesitated. "Technically, we should wait for a warrant, but given the circumstances..." He glanced at Max, who was practically vibrating with impatience. "I think we can claim exigent circumstances. Go ahead." With a deep breath, David inserted the golden key into the lock and turned it. The safe door swung open smoothly, revealing its contents, a thick manila envelope and a small leather-bound journal. Jenkins carefully removed both items, placing them on the desk. He opened the envelope first, revealing a stack of photographs and what appeared to be military documents. "These are classified," he said after a quick examination, his expression growing serious. "Intelligence reports about weapons smuggling operations. And these photos," he spread them out on the desk. "These appear to show military equipment being loaded onto civilian vehicles by men in uniform. Our uniform." Richard was collecting evidence, David realized, leafing through the journal. According to his notes, he discovered a smuggling ring within his old unit. They were selling military-grade weapons to private buyers. Laura gasped. "That's why they broke in the night he died. They were looking for this evidence." "And they've been looking ever since," Jenkins added grimly. "Reeves said his employer was dangerous. If he's involved in weapons smuggling—" Max had settled at Noah's feet, his mission apparently complete. He looked up at the boy with what could only be described as satisfaction in his intelligent eyes. "He says Richard wanted the truth to come out," Noah said, his hand resting on Max's head. "But the bad men came before he could take the evidence to the right people. He hid the key and told Max to protect it until someone good found it." Laura knelt beside her son, her heart full of wonder at this extraordinary child and his equally extraordinary companion. "And Max chose you, Noah. Out of everyone, he called to you for help." Noah smiled, wrapping his arms around the German shepherd's neck. "He knew I would hear him." Jenkins was already on his phone, calling for backup and requesting special agents to handle the classified material. When he hung up, his expression was a mixture of amazement and professional satisfaction. "This is big," he told them. "Much bigger than local police. The feds will want to talk to all of you." He glanced at Max with newfound respect. "Especially your dog." "He's a hero," Noah said proudly, and no one could disagree. As they waited for the federal agents to arrive, Laura found herself contemplating the incredible chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A storm, a child's inexplicable sensitivity, a dog's desperate cry for help, all coming together to expose a dangerous criminal operation that might otherwise have remained hidden forever. "You know what this means, right?" David said quietly, taking her hand. "Max really is one of us now. After this, no one would dare try to separate him from Noah." Laura squeezed his hand, tears of relief and gratitude welling in her eyes. "As if we'd ever let them try." The events that followed unfolded with dizzying speed. Federal agents swarmed Richard Walker's house, collecting evidence and taking statements. The documents and photographs proved to be explosive, revealing a network of corruption that extended far beyond what anyone had expected. The Carters found themselves at the center of a storm of attention. News vans parked outside their home, reporters clamoring for the story of the heroic dog and the special child who had helped bring down a weapons smuggling ring. Through it all, Max remained their steady protector, keeping the chaos at bay, his body always positioned between Noah and any potential threat. His injured paw had healed completely, as if his mission had given him the strength to overcome his physical limitations. A week after the discovery at Richard's house, they received a visit from a serious-looking woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as Agent Carrington from Military Intelligence. "I wanted to personally thank you," she told them, her eyes lingering on Max with undisguised admiration. "The evidence you discovered has helped us dismantle an operation that's been running for years. Several high-ranking officers have been arrested, along with their civilian accomplices." "What about the men who broke into Richard's house the night he died?" David asked. "Have they been caught?" Agent Carrington nodded. "Marcus Reeves gave us names in exchange for protection. His partner, the man who actually assaulted Richard, is in custody, as is their employer, a former colonel who was running the smuggling operation." Noah, who had been listening quietly with his arm around Max's neck, spoke up. "Richard can rest now, can't he? Now that the bad men are caught?" The agent smiled, kneeling to be at eye level with the child. "Yes, he can. Colonel Walker was a good man who died trying to expose corruption. Thanks to you and Max, his final mission is complete." That evening, as the family sat in their living room, a sense of peace had finally settled over them. The threat was gone, the mystery was solved, and Max was officially, legally theirs, a special dispensation from the military in recognition of his service. "I was thinking," David said as they watched Noah and Max playing together on the carpet. Richard's house is still without an owner. His will apparently left everything to animal charities since he had no family. Laura raised an eyebrow, sensing where this was going. And I spoke with Jenkins. The house will eventually be sold, but there's no rush. All the military equipment and classified materials have been removed. David paused, gauging her reaction. I was thinking we could take Noah and Max there sometimes. Let them visit. It might give them both some closure. Laura smiled, leaning against his shoulder. I think that's a wonderful idea. Max deserves to say a proper goodbye to his first home. As if understanding their conversation, Max looked up, his intelligent eyes meeting Laura's. In that moment, she felt a flicker of the connection Noah shared with him. Not words, exactly, but a feeling of gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "You're welcome," she whispered, "and thank you for choosing us." That night, as Laura checked on Noah before going to bed herself, she found him and Max in their now familiar sleeping arrangement. Noah in his bed, Max on his special orthopedic bed right beside him, their breathing synchronized in sleep. On Noah's nightstand sat a framed photograph Agent Carrington had given them, a younger Richard Walker in his colonel's uniform, a younger Max sitting proudly at attention beside him. Richard's face was kind but serious, the face of a man dedicated to duty and honor. Laura adjusted Noah's blanket, then gently stroked Max's head. "Sleep well, both of you," she whispered. "You've earned it." As she turned to leave, Max opened one eye, watching her with that uncanny intelligence that still amazed her. Then he sighed contentedly and closed his eye again, secure in the knowledge that his mission was complete, his new family was safe, and his old friend Richard would have been proud. Outside, the night was calm, no storms brewing, no shadows lurking. Just peace, well-earned and deeply appreciated. The German shepherd who had been hanging off a cliff, crying for help, had not only found a home, he had found justice. And the baby, who had somehow heard his cry, had proven that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes come in the most ordinary packages. The end. If you were touched by this incredible story of bravery, love, and the special bond between a child and a dog, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, do you believe some children have special abilities to communicate with animals? Have you ever experienced an unexplainable connection with a pet?